Hey, Debbie, how's it going today?
Hi, Sandy.
So great to have you here. And I love this topic of intimacy and that you help women create loving, sexy relationships with their beloved and themselves. That is really awesome. So, you have a great story that I see on your media page, but I want to hear it from you. So, how did you get to this point? What is that story of how you became an intimacy specialist?
Yeah, like so many of us, I grew up in a divorced household, raised by a single mom and such. And then I ended up picking badly and ended up in a sex-starved marriage myself. So I ended up divorcing and then, breaking my family up. And I know kids suffer a lot from divorce, and sexual challenges are a top reason for divorce. So when my beloved husband, my current husband, asked me, I was at a career crossroads. I have been an attorney and in IT. And when he asked me, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? And I said, love, romance, sex. And I want to be in a field where I can help people that he and I had just gotten into tantric sacred sexuality at the around that time, and so I decided to totally pivot, and I went in to become I'm a psychotherapist in Colorado, but my specialty is coaching, right? We don't need to probe into the past, the pain to understand why you're struggling in your relationship and fix it. Because the truth is that relationships are complicated. Male-female dynamics are complicated, and female sexual pleasure is complicated. So I developed some, proprietary coaching methodologies to help women get out of their head and into their pleasure. So it's been a kind of a creative and passion project for me to help people stay together, not get divorced, and make their marriages happy and loving and sexy.
I love it. I love it. I just had on a coach recently, and that was his whole thing, is keeping marriages together instead of going down the divorce route. But he has a totally different take on it than you do. Now, when you said your husband asked you, what do you love doing? My first thought was, well, you obviously like going to school because you're an attorney and then a psychotherapist. That's a lot of school.
I always score high on self-growth. Like if you do like tests, it's like lifelong learner, intellectual curiosity. That's always been good for me. But the interesting thing is that my husband would ask me, what do you want to do? What are you passionate about? And support me through this, because ladies, a loved up man who is like truly loved up will do anything to make his woman happy.
Yeah. So true. So let's jump into some of these topics that we discussed before we started recording, that you've got 6 things that women need for great lovemaking sex lives. And I know you've published a paper on this, but can you dive into that a bit?
Yeah. So the point is that if you're struggling in the bedroom and you're not really having, a high drive or a lot of fun, a lot of pleasure in the bedroom, it's not that you're broken. It's not that you were necessarily traumatized, which is often the therapeutic approach. It's just that, hey, female sexuality is complicated and you need a lot of things to be in order for you to really enjoy yourself. So I've categorized them, and it's like the first thing we need is knowledge. What is it about? We mostly don't even understand like the female arousal cycle, for instance, and also what it is that turns us on. So it's knowledge about anatomy and arousal generally, but also what do we like? A lot of times women only know what they don't like. I don't know what I like, but I know I don't want that, right? So that doesn't help your lover very much, does it? So knowing what you like is the first thing on my list. The second thing is worthiness and confidence. I mean, if you are up in your head with shame and guilt and negative conditioning and body image issues, I say, pity the fool that tries to seduce you, right? It is not going to work if you are all up in shame and anxiety and negative conditionings and such, right? So what do we do to understand that our desires, our sexual pleasure are normal, are deserving of celebration, that our body is fine as it is, that is deserving of touch and pleasure, even though it's not perfect as compared to this perfect woman that we are always comparing ourselves to, right?
Yes.
So enjoy yourself now.
So what do you tell women, like, when they're in that, because women are not going to climax if they're in their head. It just isn't going to happen. I mean, right? Wouldn't you agree? Like, it's a mental thing, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the next category, embodiment, I call that, which means being in your body as opposed to being in your distracted, busy head. And, we are kind of wired for multitasking, but then that doesn't work in the bedroom, right? We're thinking about the socks on the floor, the kids in the next room, resentment, body issues, right? So it's actually a practice to be able to calm your mind, mindfulness practice, and be into the moment, right? You're not thinking about the past or the future, but be in the moment and be in your senses, because that's where pleasure takes place as opposed to in your head. So I help women with usually a lot of tantric modalities taken from the world of sacred sexuality without necessarily, all the spiritual aspects, but things like breath, movement, sound, touch, visualization. All of these things can put us into a very sensitized, excited state as opposed to a busy, distracted state.
Right. So that was the first two. What's the next one on the list?
The next one would be time. A great sex life does not just happen. It needs to be given priority. It needs to be given time. The chances of both partners in a long-term relationship just mutually both being turned on at the same time is a myth, right? It doesn't happen, and it often. So planning sexy time, prioritizing your lovemaking is crucial, right? To keep the spark going. We shouldn't just wait until we spontaneously feel horny, right? We should make efforts to connect. And also under the category of time, as women, we need time for arousal. If a man's sexual response is like a microwave, Sandee, ours is like a crock pot. We need time to be primed, right?
I love that.
Right.
But it's true, right? I mean, there's got to be some foreplay. There's got to be some,
Exactly. And it takes about 20 to 40 minutes for the female body to be fully primed for, sexual activity, but the average sex act is over in 8 minutes. Thus, we have a lot of frustrated women out there. So it's about, communication with your lover and understanding your anatomy and your turn-ons, and so that you're both delighted.
So why is it so hard for women to communicate their needs to their partner?
There's so much taboo and shame around sex, for one thing. And people just think that you should be born knowing what to do. Unlike, we invest in our education, our careers, our finances. We put all this time and effort into learning new things, but people just expect an amazing sex life to just happen. And without talking about it, you don't generally have a good sex life. And especially, men cannot understand what it is like to be in a woman's body, let alone this woman's body and head. You need to be responsible for knowing what you like and how to communicate it. And it is a skill.
Yeah. Yeah, I would imagine that the communication or the lack of communication is what really dissolves a lot of marriages when it comes to their sex life.
Quite possibly.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. I mean, and then it also, like my first husband, we didn't have a good communication when it came to most matters. The man I'm married to now, it's amazing. We have amazing communication with each other. And when you have that black and white, like I've had, you really see it. Like, oh, wow. Communication.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it helps. It goes further than the bedroom. Like, you have to start before the bedroom. Does your relationship feel safe? Right. Mm. Or do you feel like you're judged or criticized? Because you can't really communicate what you like if your partner's going to be all like, oh, you're criticizing me, right? How do you create an atmosphere of being sexual explorers together? And it involves creating a relationship that feels safe outside the bedroom too.
Yeah, so true. I second and third that for sure. So what's next on in those 6 things that women need?
Fitness. So we need to have body, and especially as we're, as we head into like menopause and such, we need to be pain free, right? And we also need to have a body that's tuned to sensation, right? That's not gone numb and such. So keeping you fit and also keeping your mood elevated as well, right? If you are all stressed out, you are going to have no libido. You're going to have no drive. So taking care of oneself and body. And the last one is creativity. How do you know what you love if you've never tried it?
Right.
And it's not just about activities. It's about how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel, Sandee? Do you want to feel playful and naughty, or powerful, or beautiful, cherished? What are the feelings you want to experience during lovemaking? And how do we get there?
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot for women to think about. And it's
exactly. See, even, what people, I'm like, people's initial thought is, how can you possibly say all women need the same thing? And I'm like, read it. And they're like, yeah.
Now, going back to fitness, what relationship is there between physical fitness and libido, or is there one?
Yeah, I would say in men in particular, one of the leading causes of erectile dysfunction is overweight.
Right.
And nowadays, there's so many sex-starved marriages as a result of this. And well, as fitness, I refer to it, I'm not talking about like the shape that you have, but the blood flow. So things like exercise can help you in so many ways. So exercise, 4 things is great for your sex life. It puts you in a better mood. It reduces your stress. It makes you feel better about your body, even just minutes later, right? Your body didn't really change, but you feel better about it.
Right.
And that gives you more confidence. And also it gets blood flow going to the genitals, which is key to arousal for both sexes.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So one of the things that you also talk about is why female pleasure is so complex and that you're not broken. And you touched on that a little bit, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I think there may be some listeners out there that may feel like they're broken.
Oh, yeah, because a lot of it has to do with the emotional connection. And I skipped that one when I told you the things women need. Oh, big one, emotional connection. Right. So that's the thing. It's like to have a sex life, you don't have to have emotional connection. You could be out there in hookup culture, but to have a great sex life, don't kid yourself, ladies. You want to feel connected to your lover. And if you're not connected to your lover and the sex is great, you probably will get connected to your lover. So be aware that great sex will bond you to this person. So be careful. So emotional connection is what women need. And that also adds a big layer of complication to relationships, because if we don't feel safe and we don't feel cherished and we don't feel like our lover thinks we were desirable and beautiful, that's one more challenge that keeps us up in our head and keeps us from enjoying our sex life. So feeling emotionally connected is key, plus all those other things I mentioned. So that's why female sexuality, I maintain, is complicated.
Right. So you mentioned on your media, your bio sheet, how is porn impacting your intimacy?
Yeah, I'm really anti-porn.
Does that affect it, or is it a good thing? Would it help people or no?
I say no. But here's why I say no. Because I am a love-making coach, right? I am all about love and emotional connection, right? There's no doubt about it that people get turned on by porn. There's something sexy about naked bodies doing it, right? That we are programmed to think that that's sexy. But I am actually seeing so much negative impact of pornography in both the men who get hooked on it from the time they're teenagers, right? They think it's sex ed, right? Because that's the de facto form of sex ed. And that's not how ordinary women want to be made love to. Those are paid actresses. And on top of it, it's competition for a man's attention. It's comparison, right? Women don't necessarily look like or respond like the women in pornography. So I try to get, help people unlearn porn, that's not lovemaking. That's not loving, honoring, and cherishing of each other. There's no emotional connection, let alone even a plot in porn. So I think it's competition. It's bad teaching. It's the opposite of what I help my women achieve.
And you said it, and right as I was thinking it, that whole comparison thing.
Yeah.
And I would think that it wouldn't be helpful, because I would think women would start comparing. And I know that's one of the biggest things that women struggle with, is comparing ourselves to other women and feeling like we're not as good as they are, look as good as they are, whatever.
Which stinks, because here's the thing. So many women, they don't even want to have sex anymore because they're so up in their head about, I'm not perfect or whatever. But it's like, your man wants you. He desires you. What do you care about some perfect woman that you never met when you've got a man that's hot for you in your bedroom?
Yeah. Doesn't make sense. But so is there like ages where women, their drive goes up and then down? And if so, what can they do about that if their sex drive has reduced?
Yeah, women's sex drive is very cyclical, right? We are, above all, we are mammals, and we are driven to procreate and reproduce. So this is survival of the species. Women's sex drive usually peaks around ovulation. Go figure, right? And it goes up and down through the lifetime, throughout the month. We're very cyclical. Men are much more steady, right? They often feel their sex drive more like a hunger, whereas women often need something to trigger it in our heads or in our hearts to turn us on, especially in a long-term relationship. When we're just in a dating relationship and everything is new and mysterious and there's risk, you don't even know if he's going to call you, right? Is he going to call me? Are we going to fall in love? Then women really have sex on the brain, and our sex drive becomes like a man's, right? I'm thinking of my lover all the time. I'm thinking about sex. But people don't realize that is very unsustainable in a long-term marriage, a long-term relationship. That will go away, and that is totally normal. Now we actually have to cultivate our desire and our lovemaking with each other. We have to prioritize it and keep it new and fun.
Wow. This has been such a great conversation. Is there anything else that you haven't talked about that you think the listeners should know?
Oh gosh, there's so much, Sandee. Where to get started?
I know.
Each one of those things the 6 things could easily be its own podcast.
It could be its own podcast, and maybe we'll have to do that next. It's just have like a series.
Yeah. So I mean, and I also help the women a lot with cultivating positivity in themselves, because I noticed your happiness solved audio. So if we are stressed, if we are unhappy about ourselves, it's also going to show up in our relationship. Stress is the biggest source of low libido. It's also one of the biggest sources of relationship problems. So I use positive psychology methods, which are kind of the science of what makes life good, what makes life worth living, human flourishing. Whereas traditional therapy is often focused on the pain, the problem, the suffering, the past, right? Instead, I would start coaching to try to get a very fast results is like, what do you like? What is good in your life? What is working for you? And now how can we get more of that?
Focusing on all the positive things.
Focusing on the positive, and how do we get more of what you like? And it's a faster way to transform. And it's also working in your relationship too, because there's a big component of happiness. So one of the biggest sources, if not the biggest source, I will go out there and say the biggest source of happiness in your life is probably your intimate relationship. Mm-hmm. It's also the biggest. What
everybody wants.
Yeah, or it's the biggest source of your pain and suffering.
Right.
It's life's greatest reward. And again, people they invest in their education and all the time and energy into their children, and then they leave their relationship is like the last thing on their to-do list, if it's even on there at all, So we can't neglect that area and expect for it to thrive.
Right. So true. I love that. I love that. And where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, a lot of my women find me through my Facebook group. I have an active Facebook group called More Intimacy in Marriage for Women. And the name of my business is called More Intimacy. If you want to find me on the web, it's moreintimacy.net. And I chose the word intimacy because I think it means different things to different people depending on what gender you are. For the most part, when women hear the word intimacy, we think of this emotional connection, this safety, this vulnerability. But you ask a man, what does intimacy mean? And he's like, oh, what do you think he says?
Sex.
Sex, right? And we can't help the way we're made. We are wired differently. Our man is not a big, hairy woman. And we got to understand that he's wired to think that way, and we are wired to think the other way. And how do we make this relationship work and thrive and be happy? And, between inside and outside the bedroom, there's skills that we can employ here to make things fabulous.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Debbie, it was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And thank you for being my 100th guest on my show. Yay! All right. Take care.